Welcome everyone. Another episode of What's Happening in Education, and I'm pleased to be joined by my good friend Erica Phillips, who is a principal in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Erica, you want to give us a little bit more detail around that introduction? That any little gaps that should be filled in?
Sure. So again, Erica in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I stepped into the role of principal on February 1st of this year. I took over, so I'm an acting principal at the school that I have been the vice principal of for 4 years. So it's a community I know and love very dearly. Timing of coming into this role has been interesting in terms of light of what's going on right now, but that's about it.
Oh man, yeah. So, I mean, for people that don't know, and I don't know that there would be many, but let's not assume, Nova Scotia has had a lot going on besides COVID-19. And COVID-19 probably, and again, in my estimation, for a relatively small province, has been hit pretty hard compared to many other places in Canada. But on top of that, just a lot of stuff going on. Can you just talk a little bit about sort of the overall vibe of the province, like outside of education? We'll get into that in a second, but just sort of like how people are doing, how the province is doing, just again in the last 6 weeks, and particularly the last 3 or 4.
Yeah, so one of the reasons I have the Nova Scotia tartan behind me is because right now we're really pulling together. Nova Scotia Strong is our hashtag and our motto, that we are better together. COVID, we were the last province to have the confirmed case of COVID in terms of provinces. And that was kind of like, we knew it was coming, but we're hopeful. On the East Coast, we do have some smaller population provinces like New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island that are definitely faring better than we are. We have over 1,000 cases in our province. We have had 48 deaths, which is devastating. Unfortunately, most of those deaths are associated to one facility, a long-term care facility called Northwood. It's the largest long-term care facility in the East Coast, and they've had 42 of the 48 deaths. And so that's just terrible and so hard for those families because they're not able to go in to visit those family members when they're suffering with this. It touched very, very close to home, as one of my teachers on my staff, father passed away in Northwood due to COVID, which is just devastating beyond belief. Besides COVID, as you said, we've had a really rough go. We had a mass shooting that happened in Nova Scotia that took us all off guard, because Nova Scotia is a very friendly province. People come here to retire, and it's, beaches and walking on the coast, and just joyous to have what is now the largest mass shooting in Canadian history happen in a very small community, in the Colchester community of Nova Scotia, where 22 people were killed. It rocked our whole province, quite devastating. We still don't have a lot of answers to that. Impacted a lot of people, hit the teaching community because there was a teacher that was killed. Another one, a teacher's wife, was killed, who was an RCMP officer. And so it's been really hard and challenging because you're not allowed to come together, and it's against everything we are as humans to not come together when you're hurting and be able to hug and heal. So that's been hard. And shortly after that, we had the helicopter crash, which was the Royal Canadian, the Air Force from the HMCS Fredericton ship. Helicopter crashed off the coast of Greece, and six flight crew were killed, and they were all from here as well. So that was one thing after another. And then the last little thing that's been very recent is a little 3-year-old boy in Truro, which is the same community where the shooting took place, went missing and was unable to be found, and they believe he drowned in the river. So it's just been hitting us while we're down, and again, just trying to stay positive and trying to stay strong and support one another as best we possibly can during what is already a difficult situation.
Yeah, and Nova Scotia definitely, like so many of the Atlantic province in particular, has just, the entire province has a very small town feel that, even though you've got Halifax, which is, a metropolitan type city, this doesn't have that same feel as a lot of other urban places. So people feel all of those things pretty intently. So let's just maybe shift gears a little bit and talk about the education situation. And you were sharing with me a little bit before about sort of what's happening now. But before we get into sort of the news of sort of the day around that one, take me back to that mid-March time, and from then until now, what was the mandate and the expectations of teachers in the last 2 months?
So that last day, I guess it was fitting to be Friday the 13th of March, was our last day of school going into what would have been our March break anyway. That was the day that, as much as it was a school day and we were all teaching, there was a lot happening in the news and announcements being made that we were sort of unsure what was happening. Before we actually left that day from school, at that point, the decision had been made that post-March break, if anyone had traveled, they would have to do self-quarantine and not be able to attend school, but schools would still be open at that point on that 13th. That decision went forward. Then during what was our March break, so when we were off on break, I do know a lot of families made the choice to cancel vacations, cancel trips, because it was just coming down the pipe that people knew things were happening, and it took a spin quite quickly. So during our March break is when they actually made the announcement that schools would be closed for 2 weeks prior, post-March break, they'd be closed for 2 weeks, and then it would be reevaluated at that time. That then led to, what is the plan if you don't go back? And so the whole idea of e-learning or learning from home sort of started spinning and getting some momentum there. One thing that has happened in our province is they are sending home, it's through sort of like a flyer system, like you get flyers at your door through a company called Saltwire. Every 2 weeks, a flyer is coming to, and it goes to people whether or not they have children or not, because it's through flyers. So if you had opted out to get flyers, you don't get it, but you could opt back in. The flyer outlines ideas for lessons that are not internet-based or computer-based, technology-based, from primary all the way up. And they focus on math and literacy, but then they also did incorporate more in terms of physical activity and other things. And that's coming out every 2 weeks to all families that want it. And then the plan started rolling that we were going into this, what we were calling remote learning. So after those 2 weeks, we still had an additional week to sort of get our grounds. A lot of teachers are having to learn new skills right now and get up Google Classrooms and websites and trying to make sure that it's had devices and ability to get on devices. And then we rolled with that. And deadline had been extended to May the 4th that we were going to be off. And then as that deadline approached, it was extended again to the May long weekend, which then pushed to May 25th. And then as of Friday, they just made the announcement that we are closed for the remainder of the school year. And our school year would have ended on June 30th. So we are now pushed to close for the remainder of the year, and they've made the announcement that our remote learning will stop on June the 5th.
And was there any guidelines around what remote learning was supposed to look like in terms of number of hours or scheduling or expectations for learning, or was it very much consistent with what I've heard elsewhere, which is do the best you can?
Well, this is unknown for so many. So the expectation was, especially I teach in an elementary school, so from primary to 6th, the expectation was to provide 1 hour of learning per day for the students. That was a combination of mathematics and literacy. So that was the focus. And that 1 hour a day was factored into the idea that there are going to be families that have parents working from home that are going to be on devices as well. There might be families with more than one child that'll have to share devices. So they felt that that half an hour of math, half an hour of literacy was a good amount of time to spend. Of course, children can spend more time than that if they want. And then also, depending on everyone's life situation right now, when you're in your classroom and you have them for those 5 hours a day, it's in an environment that you have control over. Right now at home, everyone's home is so different. At my school specifically, we actually have a lot of parents that are frontline workers and working in the hospitals that, two parents are still going off to work in the hospitals. And that just brings a whole other level of what's happening in their household. So really, it's been do the best you can, but families also do the best they can. Don't feel pressured to have to put in that time if you don't have that time. Health and well-being of our children and our students is the #1 priority in this. And I do know that we have, as a school, as much as we're focused on math and literacy, we still have our music teachers, our French teachers, our phys ed teachers planning and sharing and have websites out there encouraging kids to get outside and play in their driveways and respect the social distancing, but staying active and staying healthy. And also encouraging a lot of those things that are outside of the school sort of curriculum, as in terms of baking and learning a new skill, finding a passion project, something that you've always wanted to learn about but haven't had time. We have a lot of kids making like videos, cooking videos and so on, and they're also valuable in terms of learning doesn't stop just because you're not in the four walls of the classroom.
Sure. And then, I know obviously part of your job is to, support and encourage your teachers and give them the right messaging. How about for you? Have you received any messaging either from, the district board or others that you have been really sort of helpful that you said I really appreciated the messaging or what I'm being, how I'm being supported? Is there anything specific you can share about just feeling good about the way you've been supported?
We meet as a group of principals. We're all broken up into sort of subgroup kind of things. So our principal group meets every Wednesday on an online call, all of us together, and we do a little check-in. And it's really nice to know that there's, 20 something principals all in this one little community that we're all there to support each other. They're sharing ideas. One suggested positive phone calls. Other people thought that was great, because as a principal, I don't have a classroom per se, so I don't have that same direct connection with a student group like my teachers do right now. And for myself, I was a teacher up until February 1st. I had a classroom as a vice principal. So that removal has been quite hard for me, to feeling a little disconnected from my students. So hearing what other principals have and bringing us together, my administrative supervisor has, she emails us every day of the week, all hours of the day, really. Anytime she gets information, she's really pushing it forward to us to try to keeping us in the loop as best we can. Because I have a little bit of a technology background myself, I feel like I've been able to help support some of the other principals where they are so much more senior and mentors to me in so many ways of being an instructional leader, but I have that techie piece. So helping them be able to get, their teachers to add them as a teacher in their Google Classrooms and how to turn off notifications and support people in those ways. I've felt I have a bit more of a purpose, and even being able to support my staff with that, getting them on Google Meets with their kids, and just really, I've done a lot of screencasts because you're home. So even to show people how to do things, you can hop and share your screen, or I do a few little screencast videos and share them out to my staff. And there is a lot of support. We're all in this together and we're better together. So that's the big message that we're getting.
Yeah, and that's pretty consistent, and it's one of the sort of positive outcomes that are happening right now. Like you said, schools now definitely not coming back for this school year, although, it's interesting to see Quebec trying and figuring some things out there. When you think ahead to the fall, we don't know what the fall will look like. And what are you most, what concerns you most for a startup in the fall, no matter what it is? Like, what are you just thinking, gee, this is like it, because you've kind of outlined, hey, we've done the best we can in this situation. It's not perfect. It's not ideal, but, we figured it out, and it is what it is kind of thing. But in the fall, what are you thinking, gee, if this goes this way, here's the things I don't know that we've resolved or will or have figured out?
When COVID started entering my dreams at night, that was one of my oh no. And I had a dream about them sending us back, and that whole trying to keep social distancing. And we've seen it in different countries where they've put like hats on kids that have pool noodles basically hanging off them to keep them away. I do think that in older grades, I was a middle school teacher for a long time, that those students can sort of take the direction of keeping physical space. But being an elementary school principal right now and knowing my pre-primaries that are 4 years old and my primaries, keeping physical space between kids is going to be near impossible for you to actually keep kids respecting that, because they just love each other so much. And in a classroom, they work together and they're in the sand table together and they're painting together. So trying to maintain sort of some physical distancing between them if that's necessary, and also sort of that hygiene piece of it, and keeping, you know, the hand washing up and the germs in elementary schools, germs in daycares, those kind of things are just natural pieces of the puzzle. The other piece is where we will, I hope, kick off right away with sort of that assessment piece of where the students are, because some students are always in different places. In a regular classroom of a grade 2, you would have varying levels of abilities. But at the same time, some people are doing a lot more curriculum-wise with the remote learning, and some people are not. I'm a parent, I have 2 girls at home, and I'm also an educator, so helping to keep them up to where they need to be in school, it's part of my profession, so I can teach them like they're in school. Not everyone's going to have those kind of opportunities. So I think we have lots of programs in our school. I don't know if they're equal across the country, but we have a program like reading recovery or early literacy support that come into play. And I'm hoping that because we already have those teachers, that they may be willing to put them in buildings at higher capacity. So instead of a 50% reading recovery teacher, they put a 100% reading recovery teacher into a building, so that if we do identify student gaps, that we have the supports ready to go in September to start putting those things in place, like resource support as well, and having enough support there to help get those kids back to where they need to be.
Yeah, it's interesting when I ask people that question, it's actually surprising how many different responses they are, because there are that many different potential needs, right? Like when you think of one, it's like, oh yeah, and then this could be an issue. I hadn't thought about that, right? Like there's a lot going on, and I think for me in particular, that the first thing about, you know, our little ones trying to keep social distancing, I think, you know, it's one, not only is it going to be a challenge, but secondly, and more importantly, that's the experience of early childhood education, is being together, like playing in a sandbox together, working together, and taking that out of the equation. As much as that's probably true for all learning, that it should be social and interactive, and you know, keeping, you know, because if we're so worried about keeping distance, at some point you're going to have a number of those parents who are in a position to just say, you know what, I'll just keep my kid at home, right? Like what's the point? And again, for many parents, that's not an option. They've got, you know, because, and the other part of that, Erica, that I'll share with you, that I've heard from a few different people with this conversation, is that elementary teachers, especially when they're talking about, well, we'll have the little guys go first and we'll figure out the older ones later, is that they're a little bit, you know, it's that increasing that notion of teachers as babysitters, and them feeling a little bit devalued. They get why it is what it is, but then there's also that you're mostly a babysitter, and thinking about that from a leadership perspective. How do you make sure that teachers don't feel valued, right? Because more than just thank you for looking after my kids so I can go back to work, which is a huge part of why that's the reason. And you kind of get it, but at the same time, teachers never like to be seen as, you know, you're just looking after kids. So I think about that in terms of how leaders and how people can make sure that teachers are more valued than ever, not just because they're looking after my kid, but because it's a hard job, right? So um, with that, maybe that leads into my last question that I want to share with you. And again, take it over. What are you hoping comes out of this, this is a positive that stays with us? Like, it wasn't just, oh, that we did this thing and we came together, whatever. Like, what are you thinking, boy, this would be great if education forever changes in this regard?
I've definitely put a lot of thought, and you start going down kind of a rabbit hole because then you're like, oh, and this, and it just kind of keeps building. But during this time, one thing that has been just absolutely amazing is that collaboration piece and that willing to support. People are supporting in so many different ways right now across the country in terms of people putting out tutorial videos or offering free PD, or even, musicians playing concerts live online just to, allow people to feel normalcy. So that collaboration and support piece, I'm hoping extends, and it extends far beyond the walls of your classroom. And I do know a lot of people, like I'm a big fan of Twitter, and I have a large PLN on Twitter, and being able to reach out across Canada and across the United States and have people answer a question and support. I hope this remote piece has connected people in a different way. A lot of times school teachers are very much isolated in their building, and right now we're reaching out beyond our building to get that support. I also really hope that there's that grace and kindness piece, flexibility with what this is right now. No one knows what this is. This is a pandemic, it's global. I have teaching friends, as you do. We have teaching friends all over the globe, and everyone's story is slightly different, but everyone is dealing with this same one thing right now, and none of us are in school. And so I hope when we go back that we continue to support each other with grace and with kindness and flexibility, that going back is not going to be going back to the way it was, and nor should it be. This is an opportunity, and if we don't take advantage of this opportunity to move us forward and forward for our students and for learning and what learning can be, and voice and choice for students, and collaboration and purpose. Like when students have purpose behind what they're doing, they're more driven to do it. And there'd be sort of multiple cases of that right now. If kids don't want to be learning right now, they're probably not learning right now. And we've had families that have said, I can't get my kids to work. And it's like, well, why can't we get our kids to work if you can't do it in a one-on-one, right? Like, what is the
Right.
task that is not driving them? In this opportunity, like I have been doing a lot of PD myself, and one of the things I took on, which I'd never dove into, I've heard about it for years, but was Minecraft. I've never really paid attention to Minecraft, and I actually have been taking webinars and learning how to use Minecraft for education. And I'm like, I've seen so much value in it, and thinking, wow, like teaching in new ways, and maybe that photocopier budget can just disappear a little bit. Because when I think about right now, all the paper we're not using in our schools,
Yeah.
but the budget is really high. And some teachers who've adopted things like Google Classroom that they weren't using before and utilizing before, I'm hoping that they'll continue to use that as a means of keeping kids, instead of maybe the paper agenda, they use the classroom, the Google calendars. And two, I have heard that, we can meet with students on Google Meet right now, and meet with family members around the world. And one parent the other day, when I called just to chat about life, they said, we've never actually invited the other family members that don't live here to birthday parties, but right now we did. And why weren't we doing this before? Right? Like,
Right.
why
Right.
weren't
Yeah.
we bringing them in? Because we have the means to do so. So right now, like all of those virtual field trips that are around the globe right now at zoos and parks and museums and things like that, I'm hoping teachers will be open to, we can't afford to take our kids all these places, but these opportunities exist. So, exposing them to them, and utilizing them, I hope will be, again, another piece that we just continue to build on this wonderful collaboration.
Yeah, and it's that whole area around really getting clear on what technology can do that we couldn't do without it, and at the same time really valuing what it means to get together in physical spaces, right? So it's a deeper appreciation of both, right? Because I think on the one hand we took for granted being together in a physical space, but we also in many cases um, didn't quite have the right. We either were overzealous with what technology could do, we're seeing its limitations, but we also underestimated what it could do in terms of not being able to try a lot of these things. So hopefully a richer understanding of the role of technology in learning, which has been sort of fuzzy in many places. So yeah, I think that was well said. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was great to get caught up, and boy, I sure hope one day soon I can zip over your way and spend some time with you in the great
Yeah.
province of Nova Scotia.
We love the province of Nova Scotia, and we love it when you visit. So
Well, hopefully someday soon. Thank you very much. Take good care.
you too. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Dean.